Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So both of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel many times before. Both of these breweries I would say are very well rounded. They do lots of different styles and they're two of the most recognisable and well respected names when it comes to the Swedish craft beer scene. Now the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've had from both of these breweries a number of times before. It's one that I know they can do very well and a style that I very much enjoy, and it's also kind of a tribute to two beers that I would consider to be real classics of the Swedish craft beer scene. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this one then, for the home side of things, we are going to head to a little place called Hedemora in Dalarna county to the northwest of Stockholm, a little bit to the southeast of Borlänge and Falun, of course. But we're going to go and have a look at another beer from Oppigårds Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called Thurbo Nebuchadnezzar. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and this one is a West Coast Double Imperial, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And it's also brewed in collaboration with Omnipollo, who are from Sundbyberg, just to the northwest of the centre of Stockholm. So yeah, quite obviously, for those of you who are Swedish beer nerds, you'll probably recognise the names here. This one seems to be a combination of the recipes for Oppigårds Turbo Double IPA and Nebuchadnezzar, which was Omnipollo's classic West Coast Double IPA as well. Both very good beers, and they featured on the channel a number of years ago. So yeah, this beer was released very recently as well as part of the Tillfälligt sortiment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I want to say it was the 9th of June 2023 that this one was released. But yeah, two very good beers, and as I say, I think this one is just a kind of combination of the recipes that are used for these. So let's crack on and see what this one is going to have in store for us. Always nice to return to both of these breweries, and it feels like a wee while actually since I reviewed my last Oppigårds. They haven't released so much over this year, if I remember correctly. The last one we tried was an Imperial Stout. So yeah, let's do this. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both the breweries involved in this one before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Oppigårds Bryggeri and from Omnipollo, and we will no doubt add more to both of those lists at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries in there as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Oppigårds Bryggeri first, since they are the home brewery in this case. So Oppigårds Bryggeri, as I've told you before, was founded back in 2003, and they're based in Hedemora, which is to the northwest of Stockholm in Dalarna county, and it's a little bit to the southwest of Borlänge and Falun. It's a little bit to the northwest of Avesta as well. But the brewery sits on the 250-year-old Falkström family farm, and the original one was in a small wooden building which was apparently constructed back in 1896. Now this space was originally used for the flax dressing business and also for their great-grandfather's metalsmithing business as well back in the day. But all of the beers were originally brewed in this old building, but they also added a new malt house and now have a new brewery as well. But the brewery was founded back in 2003 by Björn Falkström, who wanted to revive the family farm and also revive the old traditional Swedish farmhouse ales, which were the norm in Sweden until a wave of modern and generic lager breweries took over during the 1800s. And this made the Swedish farmhouse beers largely unprofitable, so they just kind of disappeared, unfortunately. But the brewery became very popular, and it allowed the Falkström family to continue making their living on the farm as they've done it since the 1700s. So in the first year, they produced only around 8,000 litres of beer, and sold it locally, but they've now produced well over 1 million litres of beer per year, and these days they've got a new Italian brew kit and a production capacity of 2.5 million litres of beer per year. I'm not sure if that is the volume they're producing, but that is the volume that the production volume that they have potentially. So quite impressive. But in 2020, the company was bought by Ruco, which is a company that buys what they term good businesses, and they help them develop further. However, the change in ownership here did not affect the management of the brewery, so the Falkström family are still heavily involved in the running of Oppigårds Bryggeri. So it is still, for all intents and purposes, a family-run business, which is pretty cool to see. But as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 130 different kinds of beer, and like I said to you, I would always recommend these guys if you want to have some really nice, kind of old-school craft beers. The ones that I would recommend you try from these guys would be the Thurbo Double IPA, also the Turbo Imperial Stout. These beers, of course, take their name from a district within Hedemora, from what I understand, and you should also try the New Sweden hazy IPA. That's a very good one as well. One of the kind of 4 or 5 classic Swedish New England IPAs. But like I said, Oppigårds are a very, very well-rounded brewery. They've been producing some really nice lager beers recently as well as part of their heritage series, so check those ones out too. But yeah, the Amarillo was always a favourite of mine as well. That was either just a pale ale, a West Coast pale ale, or a kind of lower ABV West Coast IPA. But like I say, some really nice old school craft beers available from Oppigårds Bryggeri. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have produced. So yeah, let's go on then to the away side of things, and we'll head south to Sundbyberg in Stockholm. So Omnipollo was founded back in 2011 by Henrik Fente, a long-time homebrewer, and Carl Grandin, who is a clothing designer. So the two had been friends for quite a wee while, and they decided to start a brewery together, having discussed extensively how insular the craft beer scene was, both in Sweden and from abroad, and they really wanted to reinvigorate it from both a design sense and a gastronomic sense. And you know, having seen these guys over the years, you have to say they've been pretty successful, but they felt that the partnership between a homebrewer and a designer was very logical for this goal that they had. So the name Omnipollo is derived from omnipotent chicken, so Omnipollo, pollo being Spanish for chicken, and they were gypsy brewers until 2020. They also opened in the early days the Omnipollo's Hat in Stockholm as a collaboration with Pizza Hut, which became really quite popular in the city. It's got many beers on tap there that you won't find in other places, and also some very, very nice pizza. But in 2019 they opened up another bar in Hamburg in Germany, and also another one in Gothenburg, and soon after this they opened one in Tokyo in Japan. From what I understand, the Gothenburg bar is now shut, but the bar in Hamburg and the one in Tokyo is still both are still going strong. So I need to go and check those out at some point in the fairly near future. But in March of 2020, they announced that they would open their own brewery at Sundbyberg in a former church, which had previously been home to Sundbyberg's Sjuksbryggeri. But apparently the brewing capacity there started off with around 100,000 litres of beer per year, but Omnipollo have of course scaled up to be around 600,000 litres of beer per year. As of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced over 400 different kinds of beer, and they do a whole host of different styles. Omnipollo really made their name back in the day for making what we would now term pastry stouts. You know, the Noah Mudcake Imperial Stout, whatever they call it. That was one of the first big kind of cakey Imperial Stouts I ever had. Beautiful, beautiful beer. But other classics from this brewery, I would say, would be the Nebuchadnezzar, the West Coast Double IPA, which this beer is based off. Also the Fata Morgana, which was kind of one of the founding Swedish New England hazy IPAs. And I would also recommend that you try anything from the Bianca series, the Lassie Goza series. Those are always very, very nice. But yeah, very, very interesting brewery, Omnipollo. They've really taken a different approach to their brewing by putting lots of flavour essences and stuff in beers. But yeah, whenever they do a more kind of purist beer, it always tends to be pretty damn solid as well. So yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Omnipollo for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So, like I mentioned to you earlier, this one is an 8.5% West Coast Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Plain silver top on the can there. When I was actually getting ready to film this review, I was prepared to do the Omnipollo section of the history first, but it says on the side here it's brewed at Oppigårds Bryggeri, so they are the home brewery in this case, even though it does actually have an Omnipollo label on it, so that's kind of interesting. As I say, 440ml can, this one. I believe this beer cost me like 65 Swedish kroner, if I'm not mistaken, so that translates to roughly €6.50, £6 sterling, somewhere in the region of $7 American, so not bad actually for an 8.5% West Coast double IPA. But yeah, it was released as part of the Tofelig assortment at the beginning of June 2023, as I said. But yeah, let's see what it says on the side here. This year, Oppigårds celebrates 20 years. To appreciate this, we have, together with the friends Omnipollo, taken forward Thurbo Nebuchadnezzar. In your hand, you're holding the result of what happens when one fights together with Oppigårds Turbo Double IPA, or combines, pushes together, that's what it means, pushes together Oppigårds Turbo Double IPA and Omnipollo's Nebuchadnezzar Imperial IPA, and it's got the signature of Björn Falkström in there as well, who is the founder. That, of course, is in Swedish, and I'm a little bit tired, so that's why my translation brain isn't working too well, but you guys can have a little look at that for yourselves. But yeah, I always like that with the I always enjoy that with the Oppigårds beers, that they have Björn Falkström's signature on them. But yeah, lovely little artwork on this, where this kind of foam lacing thing is the artwork that you'll find on the Nebuchadnezzar, and the sort of orange roundel, if you like, is what you'll find with the Oppigårds Turbo Double IPA. Like I said, Thurbo, I believe, is a district in Hedemora, where Oppigårds are based. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. I'm very, very curious to try this one. So, let's do this. Oh, it smells lovely, this one. As I've said in many videos before, I've been missing the good old school West Coast IPAs. So I'm hoping this one. That was one of the main reasons why I wanted to try this one, other than the fact that it was a combination of two of the classic Swedish examples of this style. But yeah, this one's poured kind of as you would expect of a West Coast IPA. So before the head disappears on this one, we can see that it's poured with about between a half and a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say cream-coloured head. It's actually a little bit bumpy toward the top there, so you can see some nice foamier bubbles toward the surface of the beer there, a few medium-sized ones above that, and a more kind of bumpy thing just above that too. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, it's interesting because I actually remember both the Nebuchadnezzar and the Thurbo Double IPA being a little bit darker than this. This is kind of interesting. So yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, this one, you don't often have to care about that when it comes to IPAs of any description other than fruit IPAs. But I will say, this is one of the lighter coloured West Coast IPAs that I've come across in recent times, actually. And I do remember the Thurbo Double IPA and the Nebuchadnezzar both being significantly darker than this, but that could be me just getting old and forgetting things. But yeah, as I've said in reviews before, for me there are two ways that a West Coast Double IPA can go. They can be a little bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, or they can be a little bit more kind of bready and biscuity, such as the Russian River Pliny the Elder. And just from the colour of this one, I'm thinking this is going to go more along the lines of the Pliny the Elder way, because it does look a little bit more bready and biscuity. It would have a lot more of a kind of ambery, a dark amber colour to it if it was going to be more sort of caramel leaning. But yeah, I think this one looks as if it's going to go together very, very nicely. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer then and see how we get on. But you can see, of course, that it is pretty clear. This one's got a little bit of natural haze to it, and a few big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, and a steady stream of smaller ones just going up toward the surface. But yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from a West Coast IPA, there's nothing too untoward about this one, I would say, but definitely one of the lighter examples of this style that I've come across before. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. Very, very curious about this beer. Yeah. Aroma-wise, this is really nice, actually. It's kind of... It comes across as really old school in some ways, but it also comes across as having a little bit of modernity to it as well. What I mean by that is that it doesn't come across as quite as hoppy and dank as the West Coast IPAs used to back in the day. So, for those of you who are not kind of familiar with the way of brewing West Coast IPAs versus New England IPAs, the key difference really, or the two key differences between West Coast IPAs and New England IPAs. West Coast IPAs tend to be all barley malt. It doesn't have to be like that though. Sometimes they have a little bit of wheat or a little bit of oat, but mainly the malt base is barley malt. New England IPAs use quite a little bit of barley malt, but also a good chunk of wheat and a good chunk of oats, and that's what gives them the haziness. The way that you hop these beers is also different. So you have three kinds of hoppings during your brewing process. If we use a 90-minute wort boil, you have early addition hopping during the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness, and in the aroma, it's going to give you a nice big, deep, dank sort of pine resin aroma. Within the last half hour of the wort boil, you're getting late addition hopping there. That's going to give you a good little bit of flavour and aroma, but also a little bit of bitterness. And in the aroma, it's going to give you a kind of brighter, grassy, floral type green component. And then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that's going to give you all flavour and aroma, and again a very bright floral and grassy green component in the aroma. So with West Coast IPAs, you use all three types of hopping, and that's why these beers tend to be a bit deeper and more dank, whereas with New England IPAs you tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, which is why the green components are a lot brighter and less dank. So early addition hopping, aroma and flavour wise, tends to dominate over late addition and dry hopping when we're talking about the green components, of course. But yeah, one thing I have noticed with West Coast IPAs over the years is that because many drinkers have gotten into this style, on the back of the New England IPAs and the haze craze, a lot of the modern West Coast IPAs have dropped in bitterness and they're using less early addition hops in these. And I just get the impression from this one that this could well be like that, but you do also have to remember that your palate is constantly evolving, your nose is constantly evolving, so I could be wrong about this. We'll just need to see how we go with the flavour. But that said, I will say that this beer gives you kind of everything you would expect of a West Coast IPA. You've got a little bit of that sweet kind of backbone in there, you've got a good little bit of breadiness, you've got a nice big green component that has a little bit of brightness and things to it, but it's also got a bit of a deeper dank quality, and you've got the nice big oily fruity character to this one. So this beer does have everything that you would expect of a West Coast IPA, but it's not quite as deep and dank as some of the more old school ones, I would definitely say that. But we'll break the aroma down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth before we taste the thing. So, the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have a little bit of that kind of fresh, white bready bread crust coming out of this one. You can feel it smells very much like, a fresh hedgehog roll that you're going to get from the bakers, with still a little bit of flour on the edge of it, which is quite nice. So you're definitely getting that in there. There's a tiny little bit of woodiness in there, and there's also like a wee touch of kind of Jacob's cream cracker or something like that, but I would point out that that is really quite minimal. On top of that, you get a nice a lovely sort of wholemeal brown bready character coming out of this one. Yeah, so lovely wholemeal brown bready character in there. Some lovely white bready notes as well. And yeah, the bready notes that you get out of this one are quite sweet. But on top of that, you start to get the brown sugary notes out of this beer. So in the middle of the nose, there is a good little bit of straight up caramel. You've got a good little bit of you have got a good little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, a little bit of straight sweet caramel, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, And yeah, I just like to say, this beer, it is one of these West Coast IPAs where it leans more toward the bready and biscuity end of the spectrum rather than being big and oily and caramelly. I would point that out. And if you try, as I say, Russian River, Pliny the Elder, and the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, you will see exactly what I mean. There are really two ends of the spectrum when it comes to the West Coast IPAs. But I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. So yeah, it's interesting. On the hoppy side of things then, we'll go to the green component first. So, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. There is a little bit of that more deep, dank, kind of pine resiny character to this beer, which I do really like. And then you do get a nice little bit of floral aromaticity in there, but I wouldn't say the floral character is like too spicy or anything like that. And this is one of the things, some of the old school hops you used in these West Coast IPAs were known as the C hops. So you had Cascade, Chinook, Columbus, Centennial, Citra, and yeah, of course, Simcoe and Amarillo were very old school hops back in the day as well. Comet was another one that was around at the same time. So I don't get so much of the kind of spiciness that you might have expected of Columbus, or the kind of big depth, the big kind of pine resiny depth that you would have expected of Chinook, actually. So that's kind of interesting. But then, yeah, you do have a nice kind of bright grassy component to this one as well, which is good. And then on the fruity side of things, you've got a few interesting things going on. I wouldn't be surprised if Centennial is one of the hops in this, because you do get a nice little bit of that lemony zesty sort of thing. And I think Citra and Simcoe are quite likely to be in this as well. So for me, you do have a good little bit of... there's a good little bit of passion fruit in this one. I don't know if I'd go as far as grapefruit. I don't get such a big... I don't get such a big oily and, strong grapefruit, out of this beer. Yeah, so there is more of an oily passion fruit in there. Nice little bit of juicy mango, a little bit of kind of dry apricot underneath as well, and also a wee bit of a kind of pineapple-y quality in this one too. So yeah, the way that goes together in this beer is really, really very nice. Yeah, as I said, beyond that, so you've got juicy mango, a little bit of apricot, maybe papaya in there as well, wee touch of pineapple, but you do get a little bit of a juicy kind of limey character in this one, but there's also a wee bit of a lemony note in there, so maybe there could be a little bit of equinaut or something like that in this one. Motueka might be an option too, but I'm thinking when they've used the when they're calling this one Thurbo Nebuchadnezzar, I'm guessing that they have used the original recipes and used the same hops basically, and just kind of combined bits of the malt bases and stuff like that. So yeah, I really don't know with this one. It does have some elements of it that are a bit more old school, but at the same time it does have wee modern elements to it as well. But I think Equinaut would be more likely than Motueka back when these beers were first being released. But yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But fruity wise and everything, it is very, very nice. So we're going to put the rest of this into the glass now, and we're going to have a proper taste of it. So yeah, let's do this and see what it's going to have in store for us. So yeah, this one is the Thurbo Nebuchadnezzar, a West Coast double IPA, 8.5% ABV, brewed at Oppigårds Bryggeri in Hedemora, in Dalarna County, in collaboration with Omnipollo from Sundbyberg in Stockholm. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that is a very, very nice and quite old school West Coast IPA. I'm just waiting with this one because I'm wondering if the bitterness is going to build with this, but this does seem as if it is a little bit more like a kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA. Yeah. It is quite interesting, this one, that's for sure. But like I say, it is definitely one of these more bready, biscuity West Coast IPAs. It's not quite got the same level of bitterness to it that I've had from other West Coast IPAs, although it does build up a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste. And I am starting to feel a little bit of that now, and you're also getting the nice big kind of oily, fruity characteristics coming out of this one. So it's a really, really quite nice beer actually. It's a big thumbs up from me, this one. So yeah, that is pretty cool. So let's break this one down and just describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So yeah, backbone of this beer then, if we go to the middle third of your palate, you've got that lovely, kind of smooth, brown bready bread crust. If you go to that smooth, brown bready bread crust in there, that's forming the backbone of the beer. Further forward on that middle third of the palate, you get a little touch of woody character in there, and above the bread crust, you've got a little bit more of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery type quality coming out of this one. So I think the way that goes together is very, very nice as well. Above that, though, you've got a layer of a kind of wholemeal brown bready character like I was talking about, and it does have a slight sweetness to it, but not overly much, I would say. But then above that, you start to get the more kind of white bready characteristics coming out of this beer. And this one, the malt base of this beer isn't too big, and it isn't too kind of fluffy and bready, if you like. It's actually a more kind of slick and oily type malt base that comes out of this one. So yeah, the way it goes together is quite nice actually. So yeah, this one is really, really quite nice in that sense. I do like how the bready character, it does, in fairness, just to add to what I've just said there, the breadiness does actually build up a little bit more the further into the aftertaste that you go with the beer, so you can feel the bread just kind of thickening out as your palate adjusts to this beer. But above the white bread, you've got a nice kind of, you do have a nice bit of brown sugary character coming out of this one. So let's try and break that down. So the base of that brown sugary layer above the white bread, it's got a very slight kind of toasty brown sugary character to it, but not too much, just a very, very light toasty brown sugary note. Then above that, you've got a nice kind of circle there in the middle third of your palate, so you can feel there's a little bit of a sort of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing coming out of this one. And then above that, you get a kind of nice oily sweet caramel note right in the middle of the palate, and that of course is where you're getting the concentration of the alcohol flavours there. But just coming out from that, you get a nice little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity type character. So yeah, the way the beer goes together in that regard is really very, very nice. So I think that covers everything we really need to say about the middle third of the palate in this beer. So let's go to the back third of the palate then and have a little look at that. So the border region between middle third and back third of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of, you do have a nice little bit of a kind of white bready and brown bready build up in there, so you can kind of feel that, and the way that goes together is quite nice. But the base of that back third of the palate as well, you feel more of that kind of dry bread crust. As I often say, when it comes to your palate, the more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter flavours come out further forward, and quite often on the back third of your palate you'll get similar flavours to the middle third, but they just come out in different intensities. So the backbone of that back third of the palate, you can feel that lovely sort of dry bread crusty character in the base. Then you've got some lovely Jacob's cream cracker kind of characters above that, and both of those feel a little bit drier. Then you've got the layer of wholemeal brown bread, which feels a little bit lighter and taller and a wee bit more airy. And then above that, you've got that more kind of fluffy white bready character just coming out of the beer. And the way that goes together, as I say, is very, very nice. So yeah, interesting stuff there. But above that fluffy or white bready layer, you can feel a wee touch of the kind of dry, biscuity, grainy notes just creeping over on top of that into the back third of the palate. And then above everything else, you've got that more, you've got a little bit more of a kind of doughy, yeasty kind of character coming out of this one. So you can feel that in there. It's got that more doughy, dense, bready type character to it, which is very, very nice. And it's sort of wrapped in this kind of honeycomb type flavour, which I also very much enjoy. So yeah, I always get honeycomb in the back third of the palate for some reason, but definitely the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour of the beer is taller. Then as you come further forward into that middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together a wee bit more. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, so back corners of the palate, you've got a lovely little bit of earthiness in there, which is great. And as you move further forward, you do start to get some of that kind of pine resiny quality coming out of this one. And so you can feel that deep, dank pine resiny quality just coming out as you move further forward. And as you push toward the front corners of your tongue, you've got a little bit more of that kind of floral aromaticity and a wee bit of the kind of bitter character in there as well. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that sense is really, really very nice. Yeah, let's look at the front third. Well, the brain isn't working. Just around the front curve of your palate, though, you get a little bit of that lighter kind of grassy note in there. So the green component for me is quite nice. It doesn't feel as bitter as the West Coast IPAs used to back in the day. I don't think this one is the sort of 80, 90 IBUs that you get out of these beers. I think this one's more likely to be about 60-ish IBUs. So it has a wee bit more bitterness to it, but still not as much as it would have been back in the day, right enough. But let's have a wee look at the front third of your palate then and the fruity side of the beer. So, front third of your palate, like I say, between the front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build-up in there. There's a wee touch of a kind of sweet wholemeal brown bready character, then a white bready character above that. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a more kind of bread crusty note coming out of this one. You've got a wee touch of a more kind of Jacob's cream cracker in there, wee bit of the wholemeal bread, wee bit of the white bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer. So let's focus on those fruity esters for the moment. So yeah, the fruity esters are actually quite similar to what I was expecting based on the aroma of the beer. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a nice kind of slightly more oily and dank passion fruity character. So it's maybe a teeny little touch of grapefruit in there, which could be, right enough, there could be a little touch of Chinook in this, or it could be a little bit of Citra. I say this, it's very difficult to play guess the hops these days, as I used to with beers back in the day. There's just too many hops out there to do it, and so many of them that are kind of similar in ways. There's lots of tropical fruity hops out there. But yeah, there's a little touch of grapefruit to this one, not too much. As you move further forward, you get a bit of a pungent passion fruit, but also a little bit of a kind of lighter and more juicy passion fruit. Then as you move toward the middle of that front third of your palate, you start to get a wee bit more of a, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of, you start to get a little bit of a more oily, you get a little bit of an oily kind of juicy mango out of this one. There's a wee touch of apricot in there as well. And above that, you get a little bit of a nice kind of juicy pineapple too. So I think Citra, pretty sure there's Citra in this one. Simcoe would not surprise me either. But then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, you start to get a wee bit more of a kind of lemony and limey type quality out of this one. So I would not be surprised. Some of that obviously is going to come from Citra, but I think there's a wee touch of like Equinaut in this one, or maybe a wee bit of Centennial, something like that. This beer for me, it doesn't really have much in the way of an orangey character to it. I mean, yeah, there could be. If there is any orange in this one, it's certainly not. I'd be very surprised if it was Amarillo, because in a sense, it does have a little bit of the kind of more oily, orangey, zesty thing that you expect of Amarillo, but it does just feel that little bit lighter, like Mosaic. But you do get a wee bit of an oily orange toward the front tip of the tongue, but underneath that you get a slightly stronger lemony, limey character out of this one. So yeah, the fruity character in this beer is quite diverse, and if they have indeed just kind of merged the recipes, I wouldn't be surprised if they're you know, kind of using quite a few different hops. If there was 5 or 6 varieties in this one, that would not surprise me. But yeah, a little bit of grapefruit, as I said, an oily passion fruit, some nice mango, a little bit of apricot and pineapple, then you've got a bit of orange and a wee bit of lemon lime. That kind of summarises the fruits going from back to front on that front third of your palate. But overall, a really nice beer, this one, and quite enjoyable. But like I say, it does feel a little bit more like a kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA, and it's not quite as oily and caramelly as I remember both of these beers being, actually. So yeah, that's interesting too. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So for me, mouthfeel wise, this one, it's kind of mid-range of mid-bodied to top end of full bodied. It's kind of in there. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got a lovely little bit of oily slickness to it, which I think is great as well. And yeah, the way that these beers go together, I think, the way that this beer goes together, I'm saying these beers because it's a combination of 2 recipes, the way the beer goes together is really nice in that sense. A lovely kind of more bready and biscuity example of the West Coast IPA. The malt base, like we said, has a really nice kind of dryness in the malt base. You've got a nice little bit of dryness in there, a bit of smoothness in the middle, and a wee bit of more oily sweetness kind of sitting on top of that. There is a good little bit of bitterness to this one, which I think is, you know, 60 or 70 IBUs. Then you've got a nice kind of oily, fruity character coming out of this one as well. So yeah, it's got a good balance between a more kind of tropical fruity note, but it does lean a little bit more toward the more kind of citrusy, zesty side of things the further into the aftertaste that you go. But overall, a really nice West Coast double IPA, this one, but certainly not so in keeping with the memories I have of either Thurbo double IPA or Nebuchadnezzar. I remember both of these being a little bit more kind of oily and caramel, and also a little bit more bitter than this beer is. So I would be very curious to know how much they've stuck to the original recipes, or whether the recipes for these beers have evolved slightly over time. I think Oppigårds, I'm pretty sure the Thurbo double IPA the recipe would be very, very similar. Omnipollo, I think, might have tweaked it a little bit to modernise it, to keep the beer sort of on the market and in keeping with the New England hazy sort of things, but that's me kind of speculating. But yeah, a really nice beer, this one, and definitely a cool idea to celebrate Oppigårds' 20th anniversary. So yeah, good stuff. So that's everything we need to say about this beer. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from both Oppigårds and Omnipollo as well, and we will no doubt return to both of these breweries at some point in the near future. But until then, check out my social media, check out their social media. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. The Thurbo Nebuchadnezzar 8.5% West Coast double IPA from Oppigårds Bryggeri in Hedemora in Dalarna, and Omnipollo in Sundbyberg in Stockholm. Slange, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.